All right, so let's get started. Who am I? My name is Jan. I've been working at Google for almost 10 years, 8 of which were spent on V8, the JavaScript engine. In the last 2 years, I started working on Chrome Devtools, and I lead the Chrome Devtools in Munich. I've been living in Munich for a very long time. I have a family and I'm a father of 2 very lovely children. I like to do photography, and you also see my Twitter handle, #seed. There's a backstory to this, but I won't go into this right now. So Chrome DevTools, yeah. I probably don't have to tell any one of you what Chrome DevTools is. I imagine that most, or if not all of you, have opened it once or twice, or even many more times. What you can see here is just one screenshot of the performance panel, maybe the most intricate part of it, but there's a lot of more other parts of it: elements panel, sources panel. I'm sure many of you have already used it very often and might even know it better than me. So when we talk about Chrome DevTools, what's not obvious maybe is that the Chrome DevTools team actually pursues 2 different goals. The more obvious one is what you see in the blue circle. We want to, make DevTools better for web developers, for the users, make it easier to use, make it more powerful, add more features, all that. But then at the same time, we also want to improve sort of the support of DevTools for the web platform. And when I say web platform, what I'm thinking about is the web platform team at Google as part of the Chrome organization. You might know that the Chrome team has been pushing for a lot of new features every year. There's new web platform capabilities coming out, essentially all the time. There's a steady stream of new web platform features coming out to make the web platform competitive and include all of the user capabilities that new use cases would need. And obviously, when we launch these features, we also want people to use them. And one way to make this happen is to provide great tooling. Now, of course, the DevTools team is only a small fraction of the overall web platform team. And so we have to be pretty picky about which features we support. And so usually we are, we never get to cover all of the new features that are coming out. We have to pick the most popular ones or the most important ones. So if you look at this sort of, two-dimensional map, then on the one hand, we have addressing web developer requests, feature requests, or like ideas that people might have. But then we also need to anticipate future capabilities that are being introduced to the web. We have the choice between introduce new features or improve what already exists. And you can see there's a lot of different projects out there that map into these fields. So for example, we are working currently on WebAssembly tooling support. Even though WebAssembly is sort of a niche technology right now, there's few people actually using it or who understand it really well. But we think that providing great tooling support is actually one way to help people actually adopt this technology, which we think is part of the future for the web. On the other hand, fixing bugs is one thing that we cannot do enough of. So for example, last year, I think we had more than 3,000 issues filed against DevTools. And obviously there were a couple of, or many duplicates, and a few of them were also things that we did not intend to fix. But we also fixed a lot of bugs that were newly introduced or were already there. And then you have things that we are doing to provide better developer experience, stuff like adding better design features. So recently we added tooling support for CSS Grid and Flexbox, and we're looking to add more in this area. So one thing that's upcoming is container queries, and we intend to add great tooling support in this area as well. And you can see in the bottom left corner, there are also things like re-architecturing DevTools. There is a talk at Chrome Dev Summit from last year by colleagues of mine talking about how we migrated DevTools from JavaScript with Clojure compiler type annotations to TypeScript. This was a huge project and took contributions from everybody on the team. And it goes into detail why we did this and how this actually worked out. And this is, of course, also something that we are investing in just to make sure that DevTools is on, on the latest of web technology. Well, I've been talking about re-architecturing. So what is actually DevTools architecture? If you are looking at this from a very high level, DevTools is actually sort of like a full stack application. We have a front end and we have a back end. The front end is almost like any other front end. It's a web application. Mostly it uses TypeScript, CSS, and HTML. So what you see as part of DevTools front end is written using web technology. And some of you might already know that you can open DevTools on DevTools so that you can use DevTools to inspect DevTools. And this is actually a workflow that we have that we use internally quite often when we, work on DevTools, introduce new features, debug things. And then there is the backend, which is essentially the Chrome browser itself. The Chrome browser, needs to expose all the capabilities for inspecting what it renders, what it executes. And so Chrome, or more specifically Blink, the rendering engine, and inside of it, V8, the JavaScript engine, all have endpoints that expose capabilities through what we call the Chrome Devtools Protocol, which is a JSON-based protocol to the front end. So the front end talks to the back end via asynchronous protocol. And so it's not really all that different from any regular full stack application that you see elsewhere. Although having a C++ backend is probably not all that common. So I think I don't want to dwell too much on DevTools architecture. If you have interest, you're welcome to read up on more details under the link that I have included here. There is also pretty good documentation on DevTools Protocol, like which aspect it supports, what you can use it for. This also actually links into the next talk in this series. Puppeteer also uses Chrome Devtools Protocol to essentially remote control Chrome. And so if you consider it this way, both Puppeteer and DevTools frontend are just clients of the same backend. Now regarding contributions, obviously most of the contributions to the project come from the Chrome DevTools team. The project itself is open source under MIT or BSD-ish license. I'm probably saying something wrong here. I think it's a BSD-like license, just like the one that Chrome has. And obviously we welcome other teams to, or other people, individuals to contribute. So that includes other teams inside of the Chrome organization at Google. So like I said, often enough, it doesn't scale for us to support every new web platform feature. And sometimes other Chrome teams who are incentivized to push their features might actually go as far as add tooling support themselves with some support from our end. Obviously, the Edge DevTools team at Microsoft have been contributing to Chrome DevTools or Chromium DevTools as well, ever since they switched over to Chromium as the engine underneath Edge. But we also see individual contributions from time to time from people who just are passionate about this topic and have found their way into developing DevTools. And like I said, it's mostly a full stack application, and often enough, people who have experience with front-end development are well capable of contributing to Chrome DevTools. Now, I want to go a little bit into how to contribute. So the source that we host is hosted at the same place as Chromium is, at chromium.googlesource.com. Obviously, we live in a separate repository so that it's easier to work on DevTools itself without checking out all of Chromium. We use the same bug tracker as Chromium does, which is crbug.com, but you can, if you find bugs and you want to make it known to us, label it as Chrome DevTools bug. We have a mailing list at devtoolsdev@chromium.org, which is a public mailing list. You can see what's going on there when you either subscribe or just go onto the website at Google Groups to see what's going on. Often enough, it's just about commit messages. Sometimes we also publish design documents on features that we are intending to implement. There is a GitHub mirror at github.com, Chrome DevTools, DevTools frontend, but it's just a mirror. So filing issues there or uploading pull requests is not going to make a difference because this is not how we accept contributions, unfortunately. So yeah. The workflow, before I go into actually showing it to you, is a bit different than what you are experienced with, like familiar with at GitHub. Chrome and also DevTools uses its own infrastructure. So we have a set of helpers or tools that we call depot tools that you install once and put on your path, and then you can use that to fetch DevTools. Use our build, our build tool to configure and build. And then since we're only talking about working on DevTools frontend, we can just build use a pre-built Chromium and then just build DevTools frontend itself and then run it on top of a pre-built Chromium. I can show how this works. And once you have done this change, you create a Git commit and then upload it to Gerrit, our internal, or not really internal, our proprietary. It's not even proprietary. Android uses it too. It's open source. It's not all of that widely spread, but so we upload it to what we call Gerrit for a code review, and I'll show this to you right away. Let me switch over to sharing my entire screen so that it's easier. Can everybody see this? I'm hoping that everybody can see this. Okay. All right. So I already did the checkout because it is actually not all that small, especially if you want to get the dependency, all the dependencies, which includes the pre-built Chromium, and I didn't want to risk sort of reducing my bandwidth here. But yeah, let's just go from here. So we are in this folder where you have all of the stuff here. The first thing I'm going to do is do a gen alt default. that sets up my project or the build directory and runs the build configurations. And then the next thing I do is sort of Ninja. Let's use 5 CPUs, and then build it. So this is actually going to take a little bit of time. The reason being that DevTools is not the smallest project, and we're also using TypeScript. And TypeScript compiler is not the fastest either. It runs on Node. It's written in TypeScript itself. So I think everybody who had experience with TypeScript at a larger scale can testify that TypeScript is not the fastest compiler. But for us, it's actually not too big of a deal. So it's going to finish in a couple of minutes. While we are waiting, I think I can already take questions. Let me just go to Q&A.
Yes, if you want, I can ask the question, and because it will be more interactive. What was the most tricky feature you developed with Chrome DevTools?
There are many different tricky things. So personally, I think the feature that was most tricky for me was when I was still on the V8 team. Back then, I also worked on the tooling part of V8. And one thing that I think is both tricky and also was pretty much fun is evaluating expressions without side effects. So this is the thing that you see when you open Chrome DevTools. Let me just do this here. Okay, so we got Chrome, and then when you go into console, you do something like 1+1, and before you hit enter, it says 2, right? And the reason it can actually do this is because we figure out that 1+1 doesn't produce any side effects, and so we can already execute it without affecting the thing that you're executing. But if I do something like console log 1, you will see that it doesn't show this grayed out thing. Maybe you can't actually see that all that well. And the reason here is because console log actually has side effects. And so doing that in the JavaScript engine is because, well, you have to figure out what can produce side effect and what cannot. And this is just not the job of the JavaScript engine, right, like when it was designed. And so that was tricky to introduce. But it was also a lot of fun because this adds this sort of capability into DevTools. That is pretty cool, and we also use it elsewhere. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Who defines which feature is more is important or not to implement? Because you ask about the kind of decision tree you could have, but who finally decide?
So ultimately, everybody on the team sort of co-decides. Obviously, we have objectives that are given to us from the overall organization. Like when I say we sort of have to align with the web platform team, that's what I'm talking about. Like, for example, the web platform team figures that we should really push for WebAssembly adoption because this is a really cool technology that will bring more content to the web. And so since we are part of the web platform team, we have to figure out how do we help adoption for WebAssembly, and what we do is to add tooling support for it in specific ways. Now, of course, there are also features that are not entirely aligned with the web platform team, and so we have user studies, and we also are web developers ourselves, right? Like I said, the front end is essentially a web application, so we have a good feeling of what are things that are missing in DevTools that we really want to see ourselves. But we also, before COVID, we went to conferences ourselves. We talk to people. We are somewhat active on Twitter as well. The Twitter handle is Chrome Devtools. And so we usually have a fairly good feeling about what would people like us to implement. And so we do plan some time and schedule some resources to do that.
Okay. How did you work with Microsoft and the community of DevTools?
So the Edge DevTools is sort of a fork of Chrome DevTools. So they are like a downstream repository that applies some changes to it, mostly theme and user experience. But they also contribute back to Chrome DevTools. So a couple of the features that we recently introduced were in collaboration with Microsoft folks, for example, CSS Grid or Flexbox tooling. That was a great success for both of us. And we do have bi-weekly meetings that we call Engineering Sync, which is open to everybody. If you are interested, I can point you out where to look for. I think I recently sent out a mail on DevTools Dev on the mailing list. If you're interested to attend, yeah, be my guest. But usually it's folks from Microsoft and folks from Google talking about specific design decisions that we're making or questions that are there on both ends.
Okay.
But let's continue with the demo. It finally finished building. So yeah, as you can see, it took actually quite a while. We are actively looking to improve the build performance too. One way to do this is to support distributed build that we already have for C++, but that won't help individual contributors all that much. But so next thing I'm going to do is to call the third-party Chrome that I downloaded as part of downloading dependencies, which is, wait a second, what is it called? Resource, no, not resources. That is the one. And then I pass in a flag custom DevTools front end equals, and then the file URL to where I just built, which is in my home directory, DevTools front end out default gen front end. So this is the thing that I just built in our default, and in gen front end is where all the resources are put that represents DevTools front end. So when I launch this, okay, so it does want my keychain, which I'm not going to give it to, but then it's just a regular Chrome, right? And then if I open DevTools via keyboard shortcut, yeah, this looks not any different than DevTools that you're used to. But now maybe let's do something else. Maybe let's change something. So we go into the front end directory. We go to UI legacy, and this folder structure is going to be going to change. But so if we go to theme colors, then we can see a bunch of CSS variables here. Color primary variant, color background, which is white. Let's do something fun with it. Let's change it to some bluish tint. So let's do like 128 RGB. So that's gray plus blue to the max. So that should be some grayish. So I build again. That incremental build is fairly quick, as you can see. And then I start again. Again, not going to give you my keychain. But if I open that, you see background is bluish instead of white. And this is everywhere where we use this background color. And so let's assume that we actually just made a useful change, which obviously we didn't. But let's just commit this. And then next thing I'm going to do is git cl upload. This is the tool that we have installed with DevTools. But then creates a patch. Oh, yeah, I have to actually go on a branch. And then when I upload this, yeah, it uploads it to the code review tool that we have, Garrett. So once that's done, you can use did it open anywhere? Probably didn't. Open into a wrong window. Now, if I open this here, you can see that I uploaded it to this code review tool. I can start the review by adding reviewers, and I can see what actually changed. And once I get an approval or LGTM from a reviewer that is, has the right access to the project, then I can land it and merge it into the repository. So that's roughly how it works. Let me stop sharing the screen. Okay, let's go back to the questions. Jean-François, do you want to? Okay. You're still muted.
1, 1, 2, 3.
Yep.
3. Yes, it works. Okay, so did you communicate with other browser vendors to propose a kind of unified experience for debugging the web?
So I don't think I would go as far as say we propose a unified experience, but our UX designer does have sort of semi-regular meetings with other folks on other browser dev tools to exchange ideas, to figure out, what's the next big thing that we need to support. All of us need to support. What are great user experience patterns that all of us should adopt? And so there is some exchange, but I don't think we would go as far as say we unify it.
Okay. So people want to say, what are the Easter eggs of DevTools, if there are some?
I don't think there are any like Easter eggs in that sense. So you probably already watched the talk last time around by Jocelyn, who talked about experiments in DevTools.
Yeah.
We frequently add or also remove experiments that we're currently working on that are not up for prime time to be released to the general public, but you can enable them in experiments. Previously, some of the more, let's say, dangerous experiments or not as mature experiments were hidden away. So you had to open settings page and then open the experiments page and then tap on Shift 7 times before all of these experiments show up. At some point, I removed that sort of feature because I thought it's kind of pointless and weird. We also have this thing called the protocol monitor inside of DevTools. You have to enable the experiment for protocol monitor, and then what you get is another panel that shows you the data that goes across the wire between front end and back end as JSON messages. So that's actually pretty useful for ourselves to debug what's going on when we introduce a new feature or when we debug existing feature. So that's fairly useful, and not a lot of people know about this. Other than that, I don't think we purposefully included any Easter egg in there. Maybe we should change that.
Okay, thank you. How can you include DevTools into other debugging tools, like React Native Debugger?
Yeah, so there's actually quite an extensive documentation on this. React DevTools or React Native Debugger, including... Wait, so there's actually two different ways to do this. And I think I misunderstood this at first. So obviously, DevTools being an open source project can be reused by other projects as a dependency. So React Native Debugger includes DevTools. I think there are a lot of other sort of development tools that also use DevTools. For example, a lot of the Chinese mini programs use SDKs that include DevTools. There's not much special that we do to make this happen. I think it's just that DevTools is familiar enough for everybody that there is some interest for people just to integrate DevTools frontend into their projects. I think the way they do is just take the source code, put it in there, and then shim the layer between DevTools frontend and the backend so that it doesn't talk to Chrome, but talk to something else. For example, the React Native engine. Yeah.
Okay. So could DevTools debug something else than V8 engine?
Certainly, yes. So, well, I would say kind of. The Chrome DevTools Protocol defines a couple of sort of capabilities for the JavaScript engine, and V8 implements all of that, obviously. I think there are at least a couple of other engines out there that are a little bit niche that implement at least a portion of the Chrome DevTools Protocol endpoints that V8 implements. And so for these, you can definitely use Chrome DevTools for debugging. And I think previously even the older engine Chakra from Internet Explorer actually implemented part of Chrome DevTools Protocol so that they would establish some sort of compatibility with Chrome DevTools. But nowadays it's not even necessary anymore since Edge adopted Chromium.
Okay. So are you using other debugging tools that you don't integrate in DevTools?
Let me see. So when we work on C++, definitely. I mean, we either use LLDB or GDB because these are just the right tools to do that. Regarding debugging tools, we also use other profilers when we profile C++. But when we work on front end, for designing, I think our UX designer uses Figma quite a lot, but that's not actually a debugging tool. So other than that, not really. So usually we try to use DevTools as much as possible so that we get a feel of what users experience and can also, figure out what's missing.
Okay. And do you know if WebAssembly tooling support is planned on the other browsers?
I actually don't know. So I think a year ago we were talking to Mozilla about or exchanging with them ideas about how to implement WebAssembly debugging. For them it's going to be in Firefox. For us it's in Chrome. At some point, I think the discussion diverged a little bit and we came up with our own implementation. But ultimately, we do want to standardize sort of the interface between the tool chain and what the debugger uses, so that what we developed on the tool chain can also be used for other browsers. But that's still pretty far away from actually being a reality. Standardizing things takes time. And at this point, we're mostly focused on just making things work before going as far as standardizing parts of it.
Another question that is not written, because I was thinking about it while you were talking to answer to WebAssembly tooling. If people here want to develop something else to enhance the web debugging, for example, I have in mind if I want to add a new web Bluetooth debugging feature. So what do you encourage me to do?
So if you really want to do this, I think doing something like adding tooling support for web Bluetooth, that's going to be a little bit difficult, because you will have to expose the capability in the backend first. And dipping into the backend is a little bit tricky, because there's just so much in Chromium in different aspects. So first of all, you will have to know the implementation of web Bluetooth in the first place. Assuming that you do that, and you also know how to implement the backend endpoint for Chrome Devtools Protocol, then obviously you would expose a new protocol method, implement that in the backend, and once that's there and also tested, you would implement the front end that uses that endpoint and design your front end the way it works. So yeah, like most recently, we actually had something similar like this. We introduced support for web auth, like for authentication, for physical, two-factor authentication keys. And the way it works is that there was an internship from the web authentication team that added backend support, and then we worked together to, like, our teams work together to add the front end support to expose that. And now we do have a web auth panel in DevTools where you can emulate all different sorts of two-factor authentication keys.
Okay, because I was thinking about it with all the Fugu stuff which is coming, which is very specific due to the platform. So okay. Someone asked, are you looking to integrate other language into the toolchain like Rust?
That's an interesting question. So maybe to dive a little bit deeper into how we implement tooling support in DevTools for WebAssembly. At this point, we're focusing on C++ because this is the most straightforward one. A lot of bigger legacy code bases that we want people to move to the web are in C++, and C++ has a great tradition of offering powerful tooling, be it VS Visual Studio or GDB or LLDB. All of them work great. And the underlying format, at least for GDB and LLDB, is a format called dwarf, which is the binary format for debugging metadata. And essentially what we're doing here with C++ in Emscripten is to produce dwarf metadata as well. And the debugging extension that we offered for WebAssembly debugging reads that dwarf information to make sense of what's actually going on when you execute C++. I think Rust also supports dwarf. And so it might not be too difficult to extend tooling support to Rust at some point. Obviously, we're not testing for that, and we currently don't have a great use case for this yet. But I can't imagine that adding tooling support for Rust is not actually all that difficult, given what we already invested into C++ debugging.
Okay. Thank you. Can you please share in the chat the meeting you told us just previously?
Sure, I'd have to do this. Let me just see whether I can find this. So you already pasted in the link to the mailing list. Wait a second. So that's gonna take me a while because I have to find it first. But maybe I can share this.
During this time, if people do you have question for Yang, it's the time. Because I think we will close the session.
I should have come prepared with this.
And if you want to, you can share it just after, because we will switch again.
Let me share this afterwards.
Okay.
It's going to take a little while. One thing that I don't have on my slides, which I want to share, is that we are actually hiring for open positions in the Munich location. I know it sounds a little bit outdated that we have a fixed location, but this is a little bit outside of my pay grade to decide where we need to hire to. My team is located in Munich, Germany, and we are hiring. So if you looked at what I presented and demoed just now and you're thinking, I can do this, then I would be really interested to talk to you to figure out whether you would be a good fit for my team.
So people need to develop also C++?
Yes. So I guess the expectation generally is that people working on tooling should at least have a feel of how to introduce new inspection capabilities to the backend. And so that will include or involve working on C++. Sometimes not as much. In other cases, it's quite a bit of work because sometimes, working on network debugging features, you have to know how the network stack works. When you work on debugging capabilities in JavaScript, you have to know how V8 works, or at least the parts that's relevant. So I guess as part of DevTools team, you actually get to experience a lot of Chrome.
Yes. There is one last question. Is there any update about the implementation of Houdini CSS? Will it be a big impact on debugging tools?
Sorry, about what?
Houdini.
Houdini. I don't think at this point we have any plans to extend more support into this. But I do agree that this is something that we should look into. Another thing that is sort of also a little bit top of my mind is better tooling support for web components. Both of these are sort of platform features that are sort of a bit next level in that sense, where you can add more functionality on top of what already exists using platform primitives. And I agree that this is something that we should look into, but at this point we don't have immediate plans to add more support.
Okay. Okay, so I let the people 10 seconds to write the last question. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Okay. So thank you, Yang. It was very, very interesting. We will switch again in a private network mode if people were too shy to write their question. And so bye bye everyone. See you just now in the panel, in the floor panel, and see you next time.
Okay, yeah, see you there.